610020 is the closed. Pardon me, my computer is acting up.
What do I need, Jeff?
You don't actually need to cite any statutory reference because the meeting is open.
All right, thank you. Are we ready, Cheryl?
Yes, ma'am. Proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call this session to order. The topic is on the CPN. We will make a decision regarding that, and I wanted to ensure that everyone had as much information to make an informed decision. And I wanted to start today with letting you know that Dr. Priscilla, who is a sitting member on the CPN board, did call yesterday and wanted to chat. And I reminded her that this was a discussion for the full board. So if you guys want to hear from her, then I would need to know that that is okay. And then we will proceed with Donna providing some framework. I'd like to, Matt, thank you. We do need to take attendance. So Ms. Henry, would you do that?
Ms. Sonier. I see she's connected. Ms. Cousins.
Present.
Ms. Fowler. Ms. Vowell. Mr. Davis.
Present.
Ms. Jones.
Present.
Here.
Dr. Roberts.
Present.
We have a forum.
Okay, let me backtrack a bit. Ms. Priscilla, who is a member, Dr. Priscilla is a member of the CPN board, and she wanted to, with your permission, have an opportunity to share her experiences with the board. Again, I would need your permission in order for that to happen during this meeting. And so are you interested in that?
So I just have a procedural question, maybe for Mr. St. Omer. Are we supposed to put our presenting guests on the agenda prior to and have them noticed? Would we be in violation of any sunshine law or anything if we were to have someone who was not previously posted on the agenda?
The Sunshine Act requires that the agenda provide the public with reasonable notice of the subject matters to be discussed. To the extent that this is related to the CPN, I think that the board could defend that as a reasonable notice that this was the subject matter to be discussed.
Okay, I'm just wondering, because if there were other members of the public or other groups that wanted to present, if they would feel, like they didn't have the opportunity or we didn't give them enough notice or something like that. But as long as we're not legally in any sort of trouble, I guess I don't have an issue with that.
Can I ask a question? I'm just curious, when we had presentation done at the last CPN, at the last meeting, was she not available to speak at that time?
Oh, she was there. She did not speak. And again, I'm just making the board aware of what happened. Again, we can just proceed with our own internal discussion. I was really just sharing, really just sharing. And so we can proceed, and that would keep us in good stead. And so Donna, if you would like to just kind of give us some history. You started in the meeting, and this is a good time because you were in place from the very beginning.
Well, to my best knowledge, I was kind of disappointed in the presentation of the CPN at our last meeting because it was my understanding, and I actually witnessed it and sat at the table, that the Special Administrative Board started a couple years prior putting together the CPN. So this was a planned activity, and this CPN school, they were put together to eventually replace the elected board with a different form of governance. And this is why so much money was put in a CPN, and that was going to be eventually, I think the groups that participated, we even had some of the churches and a lot of groups from out in the county participating in putting together the CPN. which was, I did not understand why they were doing that. And mind you, the elected board was ready and willing to listen to what they were saying, but we were banned from those meetings. Kind of. We just, after people would go, they would come and talk to us about what happened at the CPN meeting and how they were organizing to eventually let go of the elected board. And so this is the reason why I feel the way that I do about having two forms of governance at this particular time. But I do know that the CPN was put together to replace the elected board.
Okay. Natalie, I think, were you in place at that time as well?
Yes, and the way that it was presented, if I remember correctly, there were some forces afoot before governance was returned, and I believe the board was made aware of this in maybe late 2018 or 2019. And the CPN was basically our way of having a school recovery act that we had more control over than, Mr. St. Omer, stop me if I'm speaking incorrectly or divulging too much information. And the CPN was our way of sort of protecting ourselves from what the state might do to us. So it gave us a little more control over what might end up happening. And I think it was sort of a hypothetical, but at that time we didn't have governance and we didn't know that we were going to have governance return. So it was put into place by the special administrative board. Maybe it was a pilot program. Maybe it was something that was designed to replace the elected board or complement the elected board in a hybrid form. I'm not exactly certain of all the motives behind that, but the way that it was presented to the board was that it was a school improvement plan essentially, and it went kind of one step further. Am I phrasing that correctly, Mr. St. Omer? From what you explained to us so many years ago?
I don't know that I'm the person to really speak to that. That would probably be better for Dr. Adams or the members of the SAB. My role was to form the 501c3 documents, the MOU, and et cetera.
Well, Ned, I'm a little confused at your explanation of what the CPN was, because even before you got on the board, it was my understanding that this was what this was for. And it was being planned way before you even came on the board. That's not what it was. What your explanation was, that's not what it was. That's not true. The truth
I'm
is,
just saying that's how it was presented to us. I'm not saying that anything that you said was
but
untrue, but
asking-
that was how it was presented to us publicly.
because he doesn't know, he would not know, or maybe he would know, but no, the bottom line, it was put together to replace the elected board, the governance portion of it. And that's the bottom line. That's all it was. Because it has done nothing to improve the rest of the school district. Nothing.
The floor is open for any other questions or input.
I have
So-
some questions.
Sorry, go ahead, Tony.
I'm sorry, Natalie. I actually had the opportunity to actually go and see one of the CPNs, try to get a understanding myself of what's really going on in regards to the CPN. And I think one of the factors that I've discovered thus far is the ultimate issue is, from my understanding, is the board that the advisory board or whomever they're saying that's supposed to be in place for that entity, the schools don't even have knowledge of them. Like they haven't seen them, they haven't come to any of these programs. They really don't even know who the board is, to my understanding. They don't know if St. Louis Public School Board oversees their program. They don't know if there's a special advisory board. So to me, my perspective in this entire process is there's a lot of holes that has been created in trying to create whatever the CPN dynamic is really supposed to be. One of the biggest challenges that I have is just the term autonomy, getting full autonomy. What really are they defining, and what does that look like? And just from my visit, it seems like they're still challenged. It's two factors that I'm getting from this. One factor is whatever this CPN was to be, it has yet really had the full opportunity to be. It's supposed to start it in 2019. When it started in 2019, it really started in the fall of 2019. The programming aspect, them being awarded or being classified as a CPN, it started in 2019, but then 2020 in January is when COVID kind of hit. So I'm kind of challenged with the information that's being provided is questionable because they really haven't been around for 3 years. One, that's one of my issues. This program hasn't been around for 3 years. Two, my other issue is that the advisory board that we're being told that they don't have that. I mean, they don't know who they are. And that's a problem for me because they're really not governing this whole program, which is challenging for me. So it's still for me a lot of unanswered questions as to really what this is supposed to be.
So that's kind of what I was getting at as well. One of the issues I had back in 2019 with the CPN when it was being presented to the board and we had no control over it was the structure of that governing board. The mayoral appointments, the president of the board of aldermen, and all these other entities being involved. And we're not really bringing the community in, it feels like. Like, for example, in Chicago, each school has a local school council, which is elected by that school. So it comprises, it's comprised of parents, more teachers, and often student representatives. And I think the CPN board is missing that. If you want to talk about autonomy and what's best for this school specifically, you need to hear from those people specifically, and they need to choose their own leaders. And they can act in an advisory capacity to the Board of Education before we, make the financial decisions and approve curriculum expenditures, et cetera. But we need to involve people who are on the ground, not just the mayor, not just the teachers union, not just the Board of Education even. But if the whole idea is autonomy, we need to invite those people to the table. So my suggestion, which still stands, I apologize, I have a fussy baby, would be that we make reform that 501c3 board, and it's not a huge amount of paperwork to do this, but to add board members who represent that school and have them, maybe it's not all of them, but have them actually be chosen by the people who go to that school, people who work at that school. So one thing that was missing in that CPN presentation, I felt, and it's like you said, Tony, the people who are at that school don't necessarily know how to get in touch with this board, or they don't know how to, the advisory board, or they don't know who it is exactly. I would like to hear from all of the teachers who are at that school. I mean, maybe not everybody wants to speak, but what does it look like to work at a CPN school? How does it feel to work there? And how has their experience differed from working in other schools? What have we done right so far with the governance structure, and what have we done wrong? How can we improve? And we cannot get those answers from anybody but the people who are directly impacted by that school.
And Natalie, I'm glad you chimed in to say that, because that's pretty much what I got from the conversation that I had. They don't even know the difference between being a CPN and being a regular public school. There's no clear understanding of what that looks like. And I agree, and I think in reference to what Donna is saying, I'm trying to understand to even create the nonprofit entity. I get that part, that makes sense. But the part I'm struggling with is why would we have outside elected officials deciding what the board makeup would look like? Why would we have outside entities determining somebody coming from the mayor's office or someone coming from the board of aldermen to determine what that advisory board should really look like? That should be something that, in my opinion, should be worked with through the St. Louis Public School Board.
I feel like I agree kind of with what was stated before. I definitely would like to see the CPN itself continue, but I definitely think that the format of it should be restructured. I think maybe when it came into existence versus what I liked in the presentation that we got is what stuck out to me is I heard people saying that the teachers and the people on the ground in the school every day, they felt like they had a leadership role, and a role in like the direction of or the goal of the CPN was to give them a leadership role and a voice in where it could go. So I would like to see it restructured for that. I don't think that it's necessary to have, the mayoral appointments or the board of alderman appointments. I don't think that's necessary. I would like to keep the CPN, but I would like to see it restructured for the purpose that I think it should serve, which is to give us more insight into what people who are everyday interacting at those schools are doing, like what they would like to see happen and the things they would, to be able to give us counsel and advise us and give us their opinions on things.
I would like to also help me understand. I'm confused. Why is it that this school district cannot do the same thing with all SLPS schools at this particular time? I don't understand why it is that you need to create a whole new school system or a CPN to give teachers the autonomy to create policies for this. We can let all of our schools do the very same thing instead of starting reinventing the wheel. I'm just really having a hard time understanding why continue to outsource what the superintendent is supposed to be doing with our schools, community schools, schools staying open late, all of these kind of things. The CPN, the same things that they're doing was done back in the early, 2007, 2006, 2005. St. Louis Public School was doing that and they killed it. And so now it's a good thing to do. Now it's okay to do. Why is that? You guys are confusing me. Why can't we all of our schools do that? And then you want to extend the time period that they're allowed to continue on. And are you going to allow the rest of SLPS schools that went through the pandemic luxuries that you would say you would allow to the CPN? I just don't understand why we're allowing them to have more freedom than the rest of our schools. The rest of our schools and our teachers need the same kind of services, the same kind of abilities that you would allow a CPN to do. I just don't understand why we're not allowing the rest of the schools to do the same thing. And can Dr. Adams not do that?
Point of clarity, Ms. Donna, just so you know, everything you just said is exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying, and it was actually in 2000, really the structure and how I'm seeing the CPN is being created or set up is pretty much what the community ed schools really was looking like, bringing in the different resources. So I just want the record to show, I'm not saying, that I'm for or against the CPN. I totally agree with what you're saying in regards to, we need to identify the challenging schools within the city of St. Louis that can benefit from something such as the CPN. And in my opinion, I think that that's something that can really be done in-house within the district. And we've done it in the past, even before I was a board member. So I agree with what you're saying.
I just wanted to point out that, in case everybody didn't notice, that the continuation of the CPN, the renewal of the MOU, was added as a walk-on item to the consent agenda for Tuesday. So this is going to be part of that as well. So while I think I've shared my concerns that the governance model needs to be changed, it doesn't seem like that alternative is being presented to us. So it's being presented to us by the administration as a take it or leave it. And the only thing else I have to say is I agree with Ms. Cousins and Ms. Jones 1,000%.
So
Yeah, because-
procedurally, would we require an amendment to the motion, pending restructuring of the board? Or would that motion just need to be stricken or that item taken separately? Or how would that be handled if we wanted to discuss, like you mentioned, Matt, the restructuring the governance portion of it before renewing it?
I mean, I personally don't think that it's the board's job to create MOUs. I think that it's our job to review them. We can provide our feedback. If that feedback is not taken and incorporated, then we either remove it and don't vote on it, or we vote yes or no. And it seems like that's the alternative that's been created to us. I thought that wasn't due till June, so we still had time to work on this. But I don't.
Yeah, it was my
I don't know. I
impression
mean,
from
I'm,
the last meeting that we would have the opportunity to provide feedback on restructuring the governance and incorporating more community voice. And like you said, that it does not seem like that's how it is being presented on the consent agenda. And I guess that's what's concerning for me.
Yeah,
think
it's
that's
concerning for me. It's concerning for me, especially if it's on a consent agenda in the way that it's on a consent agenda, because it doesn't give us that option to say, because truth be told, we really don't have full information on what this CPN is really about to be able to, I'm sorry, I can't say we, I can say from my perspective, I feel that there is more that needs to come before me in order for me to make a true, choice on how my vote would be.
And I agree, there were only two of us who were here when this went down, and we weren't even a part of that decision. It was all the SAB. So this is a new board, and the new board needs to have all the information that they feel they need before we can really proceed with that vote. So I don't know if that's something that Dr. Adams can get to us. I don't think that we would have time to review it before our meeting on Tuesday in depth with the critical thought that it deserves, but it does seem like something that everyone needs to feel comfortable with voting yes or no on, or reviewing and changing the motion or the structure of it, because we are an entirely new group of people. We're not the special administrative board, and this may not be the same vision that this board has for this district.
Well, Natalie, we do have an opportunity to pull any item presented to us on the consent agenda for further deliberation.
Right, I understand that, and that's what I'm saying is it may need to be a separate item taken later. Like Mr. Davis was pointing out that, that it would not necessarily be due until June.
Well, I too am in agreement with what has been shared by my colleagues here. The CPN is a 501c3 that has been given powers to make decisions regarding 2 low-performing schools in the district. And so the model that they're using is the school-based management piece. And it's a piece that, as Donna said, was used in the district before, and it provided results. Whenever teachers and parents and school leadership come together and create an environment where everyone can thrive, then we see student achievement go up as well. And so the CPN is the 501c3 arm, and they're using the strategy of school-based management to raise student achievement. If that gives some clarity.
So Dr. Roberts, let me ask you this question. Is the 501c3 arm of who? Is it the 501c3 arm of St. Louis Public Schools, or is it a 50c3 of its own entity?
I believe it to be its own entity, and Jeff can speak to that, because I think, Jeff, did you help create that 501c3? Is it its own?
So who are the registered agents, I guess, would be the question.
I would have to follow up. It does have a registered agent. I don't know who that is. I did create the initial filings with the state for the formation of the 501c3. So as it is a 501c3, it is like the St. Louis Foundation, separate from it, but its bylaws establish that it exists solely to support of students who are enrolled in the city of St. Louis Public Schools.
I would like to know the true name that you registered the CPN, because it's not called the CPN in the way it's registered.
So let me see what I believe it is called the Consortium Partnership Network.
It's not.
Pardon me. It is the Articles of Incorporation of St. Louis Public Schools St. Louis Public School Consortium Incorporated.
So
that is its registration with the state of Missouri is the St. Louis Public School Consortium Incorporated.
So that's, I guess the question that I'm having is, does that fall up under St. Louis Public Schools? Is that, was that 501c3 created up under St. Louis Public Schools? So would they pretty much, and if not, I think that's the question that we're looking at. Why isn't it where the structure should read that they're basically advising or working or doing the business that they're doing up under the guidelines of St. Louis Public School Board?
Well, it was set up as a 501. I was asked to set up a 501c3, and that's per the tax laws. It's a 501c3. You either support or set up to support a charitable organization or an educational entity. And as I explained, this one was set up so that it can, and it is the one aspect of the bylaws that cannot be changed. It's solely to support students enrolled in the city of St. Louis Public Schools. But as a 501c3, it is a separate entity.
Mr. St. Omer, I know it's a separate entity. That's not the question that I'm asking. I get the part on the separate entity aspect. What I'm trying to say is, and I think that's where their bylaws will come in, is who is the governing body of that 501c3?
The members of the CPN governing body. It is those members who are, its membership is made up of the president of one appointment by the president, one mayor, the president and chairperson of the governing body of the St. Louis Public Schools, the superintendent, and if I recall correctly, I believe a parent is, that is the parties that are over the 501c3.
Okay, so with that being said, with that 501c3, as the St. Louis School Board member, I can't define how or what this CPN dynamics would look like or how it will be set up. That's not a say that I will have. At this point, the only ability that I have is to vote if I want the CPN, the nonprofit, the St. Louis Consortium nonprofit, to be a part of whatever programming that we have as part of St. Louis Public Schools. That's safe to say, correct?
So the item that is on the consent agenda is for whether or not the board wants to continue to operate the schools that the CPN supports. The CPN, if the board chooses not to authorize that, the CPN board as a 501c3 would still exist, but to the extent that it exists solely to support students, it would not necessarily have an entity to support. The best way maybe to look at the CPN is it is analogous to the St. Louis Public Schools Foundation. It is a separate 501c3 organization that exists to support the St. Louis Public Schools, and in the same level of control and command that this board exercises over the foundation, which is you all work cooperatively, but it is a separate entity governed by a separate governing body.
Exactly.
So just to add some information, the registered agent, it looks like it's Mr. St. Omer, as according to the Secretary of State's website.
I believe that it was my understanding they were going to be changing that. I will follow up because I know that I filed the original documents, but they did retain separate counsel because I cannot represent them, and their counsel represented to me that they would be changing the registered agent. But I will follow up on that.
Well, who is the counsel now?
I don't know off the top of my head. I can look into my correspondence and I could give that information to the board.
Mr. St. Omer, are there bylaws or additional articles of incorporation or governing documents of the CPN that you could provide to us?
There are bylaws. I can send you the bylaws the last bylaws that I have copy of. Yes.
That'd be great. I'd appreciate it. Thanks.
Sure.
Okay, so what I'm seeing with the 2020 annual registration report is the board of directors consists of Kelvin Adams, Marcus Robinson, and Priscilla Dowden White. And in Missouri, to incorporate a nonprofit, you only need 3 board members on the board of directors. So you can have as many as you want, but 3 is the minimum. And those are the names that were filed as of 2020. And I don't see any updated documents as of yet.
I guess, Dr. Roberts, the question I would have is at this point, given the information that's been provided at this particular meeting, and given the fact that something completely different is on the consent agenda, that it would make sense that this is kind of taken from the consent agenda until we're able to have more discussion and better understanding for me before I can make a decision on this.
I do just want to point out, because I think Mr. Steinomer mentioned this, or Dr. Adams mentioned this in a previous discussion, and this is kind of one of the reasons why I wouldn't mind seeing the bylaws, is that, and maybe this is in the MOU, I haven't read it that closely, that we have to affirmatively choose to not continue with the MOU, otherwise it automatically renews. Is my recollection correct? And that deadline would be June, was my understanding.
I didn't get that it will continue. I got if we didn't vote on it, that it wouldn't continue. I think that whenever the contract ended, my understanding is if we didn't vote to extend it, then there would not be a contract.
I believe if we need to make a decision, because it will automatically stay in place if we don't. That's my understanding.
So I'm
So
going
are
to
you
read it
saying-
off and I'm going to put it in the chat for anybody who wants to look it up on the Secretary of State's website. The charter number is N as in Nancy 000710626. And you can look it up by charter number because it's easier to do it that way than trying to look up something that says St. Louis or consortium, et cetera, which may be why it's been difficult for us to find. So I'll put that in the chat as well for anybody who wants to look at that.
So for clarity, Matt and Dr. Roberts, I'm just trying to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. This is on the agenda for our next meeting. If we don't vote, or if we vote, or whatever the case may be, are you saying that if we leave it alone, take it off the consent agenda and it stays on, or they contract continues, or are you saying we need to make a decision and vote to prevent however it goes? Does it stay or does it go?
Would that be in the MOU? And do we have a copy of that MOU?
Right.
Tony, to answer your question, and this is my understanding, that we would need to make to decide yes or no. If we don't do anything, it automatically rolls over. And that's really the purpose of having this discussion, so we could get as much information about it as we needed to make an informed decision. But it still seems as though we need some additional information. And so this is April. And so if we want to get some additional information, we will not vote on it on the consent agenda on Tuesday.
Which means, thanks, Dr. Roberts. So you're saying if we take it off the consent agenda for April, put it on the consent agenda for May, then we still have time to make the decision. Okay.
Yes.
Because as long as we're making whatever decision before June,
Yes.
it won't put, okay, thank you.
Yes.
So I guess
Can we
the
get a-
documents requested would be the bylaws, the Secretary of State filings, and the actual MOU with St. Louis Public Schools that we would need to review as a board. Would that, and are there any other documents that we need to request?
I'm in the process of emailing the bylaws to the board members right now.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you.
And just to be clear, because for Mr. Steinomer, it sounds like you were involved in the original creation but haven't been involved since. So would it be possible to request, and maybe this is from Miss Dr. Dowden White, who's the president of the board, if there's been any updates to any of this information?
I will make those inquiries, yes.
Thank you, sir.
I think my question, what I continue to be challenged with is, do we as this board, does it even matter if we're looking at their bylaws, if we're doing whatever, because we as this board have the ability to recommend changes or whatever for that nonprofit. That's the part I'm kind of struggling with. That's why I'm asking how much or what insight or input can we really give on this nonprofit? And I don't know if that's a St. Omer question and I don't know if that's, I mean, I'm just trying to get clarity because I don't want us to look at someone's bylaws, dictate, determine to them, like, do we even have the authority to be able to do something of that magnitude? And from just the information that Donna has been providing to us, it's been set up that, in my opinion, we don't.
I think that's a good point. I mean, so the only role that we have in here is to approve or disapprove
Exactly.
the MOU. Now,
Right.
the reason the bylaws would be helpful to me in connection with the MOU is to just have a fuller understanding of really what our relationship as the Board of Education of the City of St. Louis, and these are still our schools,
Right.
what it is in terms of the interplay with how this other board, this nonprofit, is governing it. So to that extent, but you're absolutely right. We have one job, yes or no, on an MOU that's presented to us.
Right. Okay.
So it would be beneficial, I think, to sit down with the president of the board or of the CPN board, because they're the only ones who can make changes. And if they take our recommendations, then that would be fantastic. But yeah, like Tony said, we can't officially change their bylaws or their governance structure. It would all be suggestions. And we could say that our vote is contingent upon these things, but they don't have to change that. And it does come down to a yes or no vote.
And if
I
they
have
don't,
emailed the bylaws to the board members, to your SLPS accounts.
thank you.
Received, thank you.
And if we don't approve of the relationship, we don't allow them to continue governing our schools, right?
That's what I would. That's what
I
I'm
would
thinking.
think that's accurate.
Jeff, did you hear that question?
I'm sorry, I did not.
Matt, would you repeat?
Yeah, I'm sorry. It really was maybe a rhetorical question. I was following up on Natalie's comment, just to sort of reiterate, we have no power to change their bylaws. The only power we have is, do we enter into a relationship with this nonprofit if the way that their bylaws are structured don't comport with what we prefer to have in terms of a nonprofit governing two of our schools.
Jeff, who would need to be a part of that further discussion?
The further discussion,
Concerning the CPN bylaws and tweaking them so that they comport with what the board is.
that would be a discussion for the Board of Education to have with the, as has been discussed with the members of the CPN board. There is perhaps the board member who serves on that, because a St. Louis Public School board member does have a spot on that. That may be or Dr. Adams.
Yeah, I am a part of that. And so what I'm hearing is that there needs to be a follow-up discussion with the CPN board. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, because as Mr. Davis correctly pointed out, and I believe Ms. Cousins also pointed this out, the bylaws of the CPN, they can be amended, but it is the board of the CPN that does the amending of the bylaws.
The CPN board would need to meet and admit, like, let's say they take our suggestions and we say we'd like it structured differently. The CPN board is the ones that would need to meet and restructure their bylaws and show us that before they brought it back to us and us vote on it and say, oh, this looks really good, we'll continue, or this looks terrible, what have you done, etc. They are the board that would change their bylaws because even the St. Louis Public Schools representatives are not listed on the Secretary of State site as registered agents who are able to just unilaterally file things, send filings to the Secretary of State.
I also have a question. I thought we were told in the last meeting that Marcus Robinson had been removed. And it seems like Natalie just read that he's still listed, but weren't we told, or did I misunderstand?
He did.
He was removed,
position.
but this filing is from 2020, and I believe the filings are due, the next filing is due in August, I believe, for 2021, and maybe that hasn't been filed, but it's still in good standing. So yeah, it looks like 8/25/2020. So maybe they just haven't filed it yet because it's not due for 2022.
But I think it really, I mean, to me, in my opinion, at this point, it doesn't matter who is on that board. It's basically that board needing to understand if they're looking to do business or work within the district with our kids, our communities, or what have you, that whole process at some point is going to have to be revamped, in my opinion, in order for me to decide what my vote would look like with this entire CPN setup. So I agree. I think at the end of the day, it would have to be that board doing whatever they're looking to do. And me as a board member or whomever part of the SLPS board can basically say, in order for this to be even on the table for discussion, this is what we would recommend them to do.
I'm in full agreement with that. And, you know, these are changes that I've hoped to see, and that we had no power when this was implemented again. It was not, Donna and I had no input on this, even though we were on the board. This was the SAB. So this is our first chance to really sit down and say, look, this is what the SAB wanted, but we as a governing body now would like to see X, Y, and Z. And can you comply with that? Because at the end of the day, it's about results for the kids in SLPS. It's results for our students and our taxpayers, and that is what we're responsible for. And if we are not feeling like we're getting that, or we don't have enough information to make that decision, we need to have that conversation and say, this is what we would like, because the current structure is nothing to do with us. We had no input on it. And even though the elected board at the time had some opinions, and we had some very strongly worded, I think maybe even a resolution. I don't remember, Donna, do you? But we had our own, thoughts on how it should have gone down, how it should have been created. And I think this is a good opportunity for this board to, I guess, to assert our actual governance.
But the question still remains for me, just for me, is our superintendent capable of doing this very thing within the whole district? And we continue to outsource. Now we have an advisory board over at Sumner, and then we're having an advisory board over at Clay with all these various groups. We're outsourcing all of our things for our children. Can the superintendent actually do all of these things that the CPN Jay Hartman is doing? Why do we continue to outsource everything that a superintendent? Other districts that are highly successful can do this, but all these extra advisory boards. And why is it that SLPS can't do the same thing? Can our superintendent do this? Or can he not do this?
Is there something statutory preventing us from that? Mr. St. Omer, is there some statutory thing that has removed autonomy from our superintendent? Or is it possible for Dr. Adams to implement this district-wide or at select schools without an outside entity like the CPN?
I guess I'm maybe perhaps not in, when you say the superintendent, I'm not sure I understand when you say, what exactly are we referring to? Pardon me.
All of the things that
are you asking me or Donna?
During his presentation, he listed a lot of things that the CPN board was doing: the autonomy, teacher leadership driven, bellwether, struggling schools. He talked about extra funding, data strategists they had for their school, they talked about student mobility, they talked about STEM labs, and of course, teachers having their own autonomy, enrollment funds, and the external dollars that they were receiving, coaching loads, outsourcing, let's decrease, let's see, creating policies for their school. All of these things, it sounds like the things that we're supposed to be doing anyway. So I'm trying to understand, can our superintendent do this with all of our schools instead of continually outsourcing? We're losing this battle.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm really that what you're describing is very much what I would call kind of curricular academic. What certain, and so I'm not sure. That seems a little bit outside of my lane as the attorney in terms of how much how a school is managed or not managed by, and what curriculum is utilized or not utilized at a particular school. I apologize.
I wasn't really trying to direct it toward you. I think I'm directing it toward my other board members. Why can't we have all of our schools? This says, you talk about neighborhood schools, elected and empowering the staff members to do what they need to do when they recognize problems in their school. These are things that we're supposed to be doing anyway. So I'm still trying to understand, why is it we continue to outsource this to other entities? We're doing it, like I said, we're doing it over at Sumner. Now we've lost that kind of. We don't have any control over, we have a little control over what's going on, but other successful districts control, they don't have all these advisory boards like that. I just know they don't. You won't go out to a Bayless or whatever, or Ladue, and find all these extra advisory boards and extra special schools. They make sure that the superintendent is taking care of their business. And I just wanted to know from my other board members, why can't Dr. Adams do all of these things he highlighted with all of our schools? I don't understand what's the problem.
Donna, all of that is really received. And I guess what I would like to put forth now is that we're at a place where we know we need additional information before we make any decision regarding the CPN. We know that we cannot change their bylaws, so we need a conversation with the board, CPN board, to see if it can be tweaked and if it can be something we can support going forward.
It's just a waste of money. I don't understand tweaking any bylaws instead of making sure we take care of the rest of our students the same way they put all this money over to the CPN, because they put thousands and thousands of extra dollars in the CPN. And I like to see a place like Nance, Herzog, all these other schools that haven't been getting any extra money get the same thing that the CPN gets right now while the money is available, instead of waiting and playing favoritism to them. Just because the mayor's office and other political people are in favor of it.
Are there any additional comments?
I'm sorry, I'm just emotional about it, because I just don't feel like we've been fair to the rest of the schools. And we're gonna grade them and judge them on their performance, but you won't do the same thing with the CPN. When it comes down, they get all the money, they're getting more money than the rest of them, but you're not providing the same type of services you do. So it's just not fair.
We're in a unique position to do something different, Donna. That was in place before this board came on, was elected to govern the district schools. That's why your voice is important, and along with Natalie, because you all have some historical perspective.
Well, whenever a school gets to have their own data, they have a data strategist, they have all these other extra things that are afforded to them that our other schools are not, then I'm just having a real problem with the fairness when we talk about equity. And I don't think that we're doing what the public wants us to do if we're not going to provide the same type of services. And we continue to talk about an outside management team. What do we need Jay Hartman for? He's not a person, we're the elected board. Who asked for Jay Hartman? I mean, we have Dr. Adams, he's supposed to be taking care of all of this. So I don't understand. We have all these extra superintendents, we're top heavy with all of this. And what are they doing? We're still losing students by the truckload. Okay.
We got work to do, Ms. Donna.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry, we're losing students and students are dying because they're not
Yeah.
getting all that they're supposed to get. So,
I
excuse
agree.
me, hurting because I'm tired of seeing our students leave this school district without ample supplies that they need and the skill sets they need. We needed technical schools, North and South, all of that. And all that was sucked up. I remember when Deanna Anderson worked for the district and she was around here doing a yard sale on all our tools and things like that. Things our students could have used easily to further their careers and be something, because many of these young people that are committing these crimes, they're not plumbers or electricians, those kind of things like that. If we had those instead of talking about ranking and maybe graduating 12 kids a year, oh my God, what a difference we could have made if we were really putting out some students who had some trades out of this school district instead of just pillaging around with what we've been playing with right here. I'm done.
Oh, thank you, Donna. Are there any more remarks or comments? If not, I'm going to, we need a motion to convene.
Were we gonna talk about board self-evaluation, or you want to put that off?
That was not included.
Oh, it wasn't? I thought it was on the agenda.
Yeah,
No.
I thought it was as well.
I thought so too. It was in the original doodle poll as well.
Okay, all right. Well, we can. What I'd like to do is instead of trying to do that on Zoom today, and I must have missed it on the doodle poll. The doodle poll was really for just a discussion on the CPN, and the other documents that you received was for to make sure that you had in hand. And so, go ahead.
So Dr. Roberts, when do we know when we're going to do, or at what point will we do that, the role? Are you saying to table it for later?
I'm going to recommend that we come back from our board meeting on Tuesday and finish that. Those two documents. We'll have the full board there. I think we're missing Regina. Unless there's another recommendation.
So my recollection, and I could be wrong, and if maybe Regina remembers, but when we were talking about this in the governance committee, was that once the board of self-evaluation was approved and we set a timeline for it, that we would send, all the board members would complete it, they would send it back to Ms. Williams, she would sort of compile the results, and then we would use that as a discussion at a future meeting solely dedicated to the board evaluation, whether that was going to be a retreat or something like that. That was my recollection, but that was a long time ago. So
Matt, that sounds like it's on target. And so I'll come back to closing out this session and collaborating with Regina so we can set that timeline and move forward with with that document.
well, then I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Ms. Sonier, Ms. Cousins,
Yes.
Ms. Vowell,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yep.
Ms. Jones,
Yes.
Dr. Roberts,
Yes.